Hey everybody, it's Miranda here from the Swirly Doos Education Design Team. In today's video, I'm sharing with you the January Technique add-on, which was the Kaisercraft recipe box. Super amazing, beautiful papers from Fab Scraps and the Kaisercraft flowers and everything. I'm going to show you a start to finish on how I did mine, but I wanted to share with you that I did decide to do a photo box, so I used, my own alphas instead of the recipe one, so you don't have to necessarily use it as a recipe album. And then later on in the month, I will show you what I'm going to do to the inside of mine, but I just want to give you a quick overview of what you're going to be seeing me work on today. If you haven't seen my video on the peeled paint tutorial, I do have a previous tutorial on the Swirly Doos channel, but I do give you an overview on this one as well, so you can pretty much learn how to do that really cool technique. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. If you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you. Okay, so the first thing I have done is I have gessoed the entire box, and I'm now going to do a peeled paint technique, which I have a tutorial video here on the Swirly Doos channel already for this if you haven't seen it. I'll kind of give you an overview here. You just put your base coat down, any color you want to work with. I'm using pink and blue on mine, so I'm going to put pink as my base coat, so when I peel the blue paint, that is what's showing through. And what you're going to use to do this is just regular Vaseline, any kind of Vaseline you have in your house, and you're just going to rub it in different areas and kind of do it in a streaking motion. You could use a paintbrush, that might work better than your finger actually, but I usually just use my finger to do it, and just kind of streak it down all over the box wherever I want the blue paint to peel back from. And you just want to kind of blend it to where it's like a natural look to it, and just use a liberal amount of the Vaseline. And you don't have to wait for it to dry or anything. You just put the Vaseline on there and then paint directly on top of it. And it's basically creating a resist area. So I'm just adding that all over the box in random places wherever I want it to peel back. And then you can see there all the shiny areas, that's where the Vaseline is. And now I'm just going to paint directly on top of that with this pale blue color that I had. And just paint it regularly as if there's nothing underneath, just a good cover. And then you can see when it is dry that the places where the Vaseline is at do become darker and shiny. You're not getting rid of that Vaseline. So all I'm doing now is just taking a paper towel and going in and wiping off all of these areas. And I just kind of changed the side of the paper towel I'm using, so I'm not going back over it with any of the gunked up paint on there. So just use a fresh piece of the paper towel and keep changing that out. And just wipe over all of the areas. I just kind of go over it roughly at first, and then I go in and really go over it, and then I'll also end up sanding it too to get any excess off of there. And then I did find that some paints, some different acrylic paints actually do peel. Like when you start to rub off the Vaseline, it will just peel off. But this one was more wiping off than peeling off, but it's the exact same effect. So you can see there, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it is completely peeled off. That's just kind of a rough draft. And then that is when it's all completely peeled off. And you'll just keep wiping until you can't get any more off of there, basically. And then I always take just a fine grit sandpaper and just kind of go over the entire thing, just to distress it up so it doesn't look so, new and clean, and then to get any excess paint off of there from the resisted areas. And then I also use frayed burlap distress ink, and I go in and just kind of go around the edges and the little window areas. Then I also just kind of streak up some of the paint areas just to make it look really weathered. And I did this 2 or 3 times with the frayed burlap distress ink just to get kind of a depth to it and a really old look. So I'm just using my finger to kind of blend it upward. And now I'm going to start on the front of my box, and I decided that I did not want that window to be there, so I am going to cover that up, and I'm just cutting the beautiful Fab Scraps paper down to size that I need. And I'm going to distress up all of those edges with my Prima Distress tool. I do that off camera. And I'm just going to use regular Mod Podge to adhere it down. I'm typically a gel medium user, but I was out and I had a couple of bottles of this from a long time ago. So just using Mod Podge here. And I want to use music note paper on this box because I did decide to do a photo box instead of a recipe one, and I just love using vintage book paper or vintage music note paper. So that's what I'm using here, and I'm just distressing up the edges with the frayed burlap. And then I'm going to fold my paper in half just at the top part to give me a little crease, and I'm going to cut down that line, and then I'm going to roll back the paper, kind of curl it back, and then I'm going to lace that up with chain as well. So I'm just distressing up the areas that I've rolled backwards so that when it shows, it's nice and finished off. And I'm just spraying it with water and using a Sharpie. You can use a paintbrush, anything you have, to curl it back. And if you do this when it's wet, it really helps the paper to form. If you just try to keep the paper rolled back when it's just dried, it just doesn't work as well for me. I'll have to glue it down or something. So I always wet it, and then as you heat set it, it will start to keep that form. And when I do lace it up, I actually go in and unroll it, and then it immediately rolls back into the regular shape because I did wet it first. I'm just taking a little marker now, and I'm marking dots. I'm just eyeballing it. I'm not a big measurer. Nothing's ever going to be perfect with me. So I'm just making my dots to do the lacing up. And I'm just going to use my Crop-A-Dile to lace it up and punch my little holes. And like I said, I can roll back the paper here, but it'll still take its form. And I'm just going to use Mod Podge to adhere it down again. And I like to adhere my paper down before I try to lace it up. It gives it a lot more stability. And in there I've added some mesh screen type, almost like a chicken wire, but a much smaller one. And I'm adding it for those windows. I'm just placing it on the inside. I cut it to size to fit the whole inside of it. And I'm just using my Tim Holtz Tiny Attacher to staple that chicken wire down in there. And now I'm going to work on the top of it, and I'm going to use one of the beautiful pieces of Fab Scraps paper. I've cut it to size, and I did gesso around the edges of the box lid so that if the paper fell short in any areas, there's a nice white background instead of the wood coming through. And then again, I'm just going to use Mod Podge to adhere this down. Okay, so I'm just placing my paper down, and I'm going to pull out some vintage crocheted lace from my stash to kind of go with the look I'm going for with this box. And it's a gathered lace, so I'm going to end up cutting that sewing part out so that it's not so bulky under the paper when I layer the music note paper on top of there. So I'm just cutting that big seam part off of there, and I'm just going to use hot glue to adhere this down. And as I go down the lid with the hot glue, you'll see me just kind of pushing it upward and kind of ruffling the trim up. I'm just going to cut off the excess on the bottom. And now I've cut the music note paper to the length that I need, but now I'm just going to end up tearing this. I'm just kind of getting a feel to where I want to start tearing the paper at. I don't ever measure anything, so I'm just going to eyeball it and tear it, and then if I need to tear a little bit more, I'll do that. And I'm just cutting the white part of the edge off so that all the music note paper is showing on there. And I'm just going to use frayed burlap to distress the edges. And now again, I'm just going to use Mod Podge to adhere this down. And I'm not going to go all the way to the edge where that lace is because I want to kind of ruffle up that torn edge of the music note paper. And now I have torn some random strips of the music note paper out, and I'm just distressing them up with the frayed burlap, and I'm going to kind of collage them on there and just put some Mod Podge and apply them randomly around the outside of my box, on the sides and on the back of it, just to kind of blend in all the paper. And now I'm taking a mask. It's a Crafters Workshop ledger mask, and what I'm using is called all-purpose stucco paste, and I get this stuff at Home Depot or Lowe's. It is just a much cheaper alternative to the texture paste and the modeling pastes. It's not as smooth as they are. It's got a very gritty texture to it, but I like that actually, and it really holds its form. I found with some other ones that when I would go across my mask with them, sometimes they would seep under it, and this stuff, I've never had a problem with that. And it is a little bit gritty, and it kind of is like nails on a chalkboard when you scrape across your mask sometimes, but it doesn't bother me, and that tub will last me probably 6 months, 7 months, and it's about $10, so it's a really, really good deal. As soon as I found that, I pretty much stopped using all the other ones. And I'm just going to go all the way around my box with this and just randomly apply the ledger mask on there. And since I'm not using this as a recipe box, I didn't get to use that beautiful chipboard piece that comes in the kit. So I'm just pulling some chipboard alphas from my stash to kind of mimic that. And I'm going to have it say photos. And this is just a little chipboard flourish from my stash, which I have colored with some Prima chalkboard ink. I'm just adhering all of this down to the top of it. And I did spray those chipboards with some sprays, a couple of different colors to get a nice depth to them. And now I'm going to start adhering my flowers. The beautiful Kaisercraft flowers that come in this kit are one of my favorites. I use these a lot. They're just so beautiful, the paper blooms, and they're kind of two different color pinks. So playing around with the placement, and I'm going to add that beautiful resin piece, the Prima resin piece that came in the kit down there on the bottom. And I've also got some blue petally flowers from the November Technique kit with the gelatos. I had a couple of those left over, so I'm going to add those in there, and then just some generic white flowers from my stash. But I'm just playing around with the placement. I want a big flower cluster going from the top part all the way down the bottom and the side of the box. So I'm just kind of adding those in there, seeing where they look the best, and then using hot glue to adhere them down. And when you do this, just be really careful that you're placing your glue to where it's not going to glue your lid closed. You'll see me periodically opening up the lid to make sure that I'm not gluing the flowers to where it's going to stop the lid from opening up. So when I go up and over the sides, I just have to be really careful with where I place my glue at. Like right there, I just adhere the glue to that little edge there on the lid so that my box will still open up fine. And I did go over all of the flowers with a little bit of gesso. It's just like a basic step that I do. And I'm sorry that I went off camera, off frame a little bit here, but I'm just adhering more flowers down. Okay, now I'm going to adhere the resin corner piece up here in the top, and I'm making sure I put it inset because the box lid won't open if I have it completely flush up against the corner. So I just took it down a little bit. Now I'm adding the other resin piece into the little V right there where I did the corset lacing at. And I've added a little applique from my stash down here coming out of the bottom of that. And the last thing I do is I just take the little beautiful Prima Sade and Crystals bling that come in the kit, and I just have them coming in and out of the flower cluster in different areas, just kind of peeking out, and I put them on the applique, and I go in and put them on the flourishes too, just randomly throughout. I think I used all but maybe 3 of them. So just kind of place them all over the place. And that is basically all that I did, y'all. If you have any questions at all on anything I've done in this video, just leave me a comment down below. This box is wonderful. Again, you don't have to use it for just recipes. It can be used for anything. And later on in the month, I will be showing you what I'm going to do to the inside and the inserts and everything. So as always, visit swirlydoos.com and make sure to be a subscriber to guarantee you get your hands on these kits. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thanks for watching.